And welcome to another episode of What's My Story. And this afternoon, I'm delighted to say hello and welcome onto the show. Emma Jaynes, come and say hello.
Hi, Chris. Hello. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. And how's your day panning out?
It's all right actually. I've been hosting the Biggleswade Link for Coffee this morning, so that went really well. Some new faces, so lovely. Good day. Yeah.
Fantastic. Right, now, what we're going to do, I've got a cold coming on, which is why I'm wiping my nose. Emma, we met at Hitchin. I don't know how long ago that was. Probably, I'm guessing the speed this year's gone probably 6 months ago, which is, my first impression, which I've never told you this actually.
Oh dear.
You might be surprised, but I think what happened was there was a problem with the host for that event, and I think I'd rolled in pretty late, and you were there, and we sat around chatting because I sat next to you, and we sat around chatting, and I thought, well, interesting thing what you're doing now, angelic healing and stuff like that, because that kind of group has got a few people in that space. But subsequently, after we met, and I think we met Hitchin Drinks actually another time and at various other places, you started to tell me that you weren't always as bubbly and positive and confident as you are now. So, how do you respond to that?
Well, how long have you got? Yeah. So, golly. I don't, yeah. So without sort of breaking things, breaking through an entire life story, I suppose, yeah, I may as well get straight in there. I had actually, like you say, been setting up my business, doing the kind of angelic Reiki and the spiritual healing and all that stuff, and meditation groups and things like that. But prior to that, I'd actually been working within mental health services, both in the NHS and the voluntary sector. And how I got into that, which is kind of what you're aiming towards really, is I got into that route through something which at the time was fairly new, called peer support work. And I was trained within the NHS as a peer support worker. And so taking that back, a peer support worker within mental health services is somebody who uses their lived experience and is trained to use their lived experience as someone who has struggled with mental ill health and related challenges in order to support those people who are now kind of under mental health services or going through struggles of their own. So part of my story was that this time kind of 6 years ago, actually, which in the scheme of things isn't a very long period of time, I had reached a point which I was labelled with what they call a severe mental illness, and I was also chronic alcoholic at the point at which I could no longer function in any way at all within society or anything else. So that's kind of
So going back 6 years, what you were saying there is that essentially you're in a pretty dark space. What actually led you to sort of get to that position? What was the situation that kind of, because at some point, obviously before that, I don't know how many years, but at some point before that, everything was going all right. So something must have I don't know what you were doing, leaving school and in those early years, but like very quickly, sort of, how did you get into that space?
Well, it's quite an interesting one, and obviously, over the years, having received a lot of support and a lot of therapy and all sorts of other things with that, I've delved into the whys and wherefores of why that might happen. And so, when we're talking about life events, I suppose, I was as a child, things on the surface of it seemed sort of okay. When I was about 10 or 11, 12, I I kind of made a transition to a school which was kind of outside of the realms of my kind of family and experience, and so I was sent. I got a scholarship to go to a private school in Bedford, and was kind of stepped outside of a comfort zone that I had experienced. And I, you know, at the time, a couple of simultaneous things were going on. I experienced really a lot of bullying at school, and at home. My mum had just given birth to twin girls, and I also have another sister, and she was experiencing mental ill health as well, you know, in hindsight, and you know, coping with that using alcohol as well herself. And so during that period of my childhood, things became quite unsteady. And so, you know, you can surmise as to how much one thing or another might have led to things that happened later on. On the surface of it, I appeared to kind of get through it all right. I first experienced what would be called symptoms of mental ill health around that time, when I was getting really severe panic attacks and anxiety, which led to OCD and things like that. But I managed to kind of get through school. It was all very quiet. It wasn't really talked about, you know, at the time. At school, my school didn't want to know about bullying, you know, our girls don't do things like that, you know, and all that sort of thing. So I kind of, I suppose my character was, even at the time, I still had that sense within me of, you know, I'll just keep a smiley face on and, you know, kind of get through the days, you know, and that's what I did really. And you know, I got through school, I got all my exams, you know, I took a year out and I went to art college in Falmouth, and really after a particularly traumatic experience where I made a really not well thought through decision about a trip to the other side of the world by myself, I actually came back, and I think at that point, around the age of sort of 19, 20, my little system just couldn't cope with it anymore. And, you know, the kind of getting through every day, it turned, something had happened where everything had just got to trigger event, and I just, you know, that was the first time I started to take medication. After a 7-minute appointment with a doctor who kind of, you know, gave me some pills and said, oh, well, you have panic disorder, anxiety disorder and depression, so take these. And I didn't realise at the time, and I was completely oblivious to this, there was a lot of scandal going on in the around the world about a certain drug called Suroxa, and which they, you know, I think Panorama had done a program on it a couple of years later actually about the effects of this medication causing people to become homicidal or suicidal in various parts of the world. And of course, for me, unfortunately, it had the latter effect, and the tablets themselves actually make it worse. And that was the first sort of hospitalisation I had at that time. So, you know, quite a lot happening in a short space of time, a number of trigger events, and then that was kind of the start of things, you know, not going so well. And but then, even at that point, I kind of, you know, I was free, and I was determined, absolutely obsessed that I was going to finish this degree. So I actually transferred, you know, back up to Cambridgeshire, and I finished my degree after taking a year out. During which time I'd kind of sussed that the pills weren't doing me any good, so I didn't take anything for quite a period of time, and you know, sort of muddled through. Finished my degree, and I was kind of in this huge state of relief, and I started work, and you know, started to plan the next stage of my life really. And then that's when I knew that I wanted to carry on. I'd finished my degree in art history, and I wanted to carry on. actually working with a particular professor of feminist art history up in Leeds, and I kind of tracked her down, did a lot of voluntary work where she happened to be, and managed to get a place on her one of her feministry masters at Leeds. And then in the interim, I'd met who was to become my husband, and very quickly started popping out children all over the place. So I didn't actually make it to Leeds until in between my second and third babies, at which point I kind of commuted up and down to Leeds from Bedfordshire for a couple of years. And after my third son, during that time, you know, sort of going back a little bit with the alcohol, because obviously that was what finally, you know, became the turning point at the end. I had been using alcohol more and more to manage my emotional state over those years in between having you know, pregnancies, and you know, it reached a turning point where it was more than just a social thing where I went out. You know, I was well known in my teens as a bit of a party animal, and but there was a transitionary point where I was using alcohol to manage my state of mind and my emotional state, and it progressed. I mean, it progressed quite rapidly at times, and after my third son was when I was referred to mental health services by my GP, and at that point was again given a very similar type of medication to the one I'd been given sort of 10 years previously, which ended up having the same effect. You know, even though I pointed out that, oh, last time I had one of these, it made me worse. Oh no, that's not going to happen. But it did actually, and so consequently, instead of kind of you know, at the time there were waiting lists for things like talking therapies and stuff like that, and even though it had been recommended that that's what I was needed, that's what I needed, they weren't available because they'd closed on the waiting list for talking therapies because they had exceeded 2 years, and you know, it was so other way. Do you know what I mean? There must be something else. Or I've always been somebody who's wanted to help myself about stuff. So if I ever find myself or found myself kind of afflicted with anything, I'll buy every single book on the topic. You know, I'll Google everything. I'll see every point of view until I know what to do. And I've done it with giving birth, with, you know, bits of me that they've wanted to extract, like gallbladders, which I still have, incidentally, after several years of them trying to chase me around to take it out. You know, all sorts of things. And with my children, so I've always been someone with a natural curiosity to, you know, there must be something I can do to help myself, and there must be another way. Even though, you know, ironically, with the alcoholism, it took a little bit longer for me to recognise that was a big issue. I eventually ended up, after my therapist that I had at the time said to me, you know, actually, I think you need to go back to your psychiatrist for a second opinion, because she felt that you know, I wasn't just experiencing what they call depression and anxiety, I was experiencing something else. And so I ended up with a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. Consequently, I thought, right, okay, well, I'll do that. I did what I usually do, read everything there was to read about it, you know, grilled people about it, set up my own bipolar self-help group in the village where I live, which I ran for quite a few years. And you know, got involved with the main bipolar charity in the country, and you know, really sort of did my best to sort of deal with this thing. But equally at the time, you know, things were were sort of the other equation in there, of course, was the alcohol. And of course, it took me a long while to make the link, and a lot of denial, actually, classic denial place to be in, where I didn't want to look at the fact that alcohol could have been a main, one of the large elements that really wasn't helping, but so I used to take periods of time where I didn't drink any alcohol at all. And then I'd start drinking again, and it sort of get out of control. And eventually, after quite a longer period in hospital, a doctor actually identified, and then I do what they call a dual diagnosis, which is lovely. So a bipolar and an alcohol problem, as well as 4 times the amount of medication that I was on when I went in, and 4 stone additional weight on me, at least, and terribly unhealthy, actually. And actually that went on for another year. I kind of, it wasn't until March 2010, and I had a particularly challenging. I just, had almost made a conscious decision that I would just sit there and drink until I didn't wake up one day, and that's really what I wanted to happen. It was a terribly lonely, terribly miserable, horrible place to be, where I couldn't, I couldn't feel anything, which on the one hand is good, but on the other hand, in moments of kind of rare moments of enlightenment, was a terribly painful place to be. And I literally, one morning I got up, at the usual time is to get up in the middle of the night. My sleep was all over the place. I might sleep for an hour and then not be able to sleep, unless I had a drink. And it was kind of 24/7 drinking, really. I didn't know what time of day it was. It wasn't like that. It had gone past that stage where it wasn't like party drinking. There was never alcohol felt good, actually. And of course, there's a horrible place where you're kind of physically dependent on the alcohol. So you don't want it, but you have to have it. And so it's that horrible, you can't live without it, but you can't live with it either. A horrible limbo state to be in. And so I was sat up, I got up, and I went to switch on the TV. Funny enough, at the time, the only thing I used to be able to watch was that channel that has all the comedy programs on. Gold, is it? Yeah. So because I was in such a desperate, dark place that anything that had a slight glimmer of misery to it, just, I just couldn't watch it. So I thought, I had this kind of illusion if I watched comedy programs, I was going to cheer my life up, So I used to get up at 4 a.m. almost every morning and have a drink, and then sit down and sort of watch these programs. And at the time, it's funny because I suppose people assume that when you're chronic alcoholic like that, I couldn't function. And of course, I drink enough alcohol to get me to a level that, so I wouldn't have looked as if I was drunk particularly. And my tolerance was very high at the time. So, it was to ward off panic and ward off the DTs and all that sort of thing. So this particular morning I woke up for live music sessions. Sorry, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say, so I mean, what you've depicted there is I suspect there are lots and lots of people out there that are in that kind of place, and the combination of the drugs and the alcohol, and actually we were talking about this. The drugs could keep you in a pretty unemotional, sort of stable, but almost like a shadow existence. And I mean, how do you get out? I mean, we know that you actually worked out, because you worked it out yourself, that you were gonna break this cycle. But what was it that happened that you said, "Well, I've had enough of this. I am no longer going to be in this space. I've got to get out of it." What was it that made that happen?
Yeah, well, essentially, this particular, at the time there were a number of things that happened. The first thing, obviously, was this kind of moment, was sat on the sofa watching this program, and it was KD Lang. KD Lang was doing this concert in the St. Luke's Chapel in London, and I don't know what it was, but I kind of connected with this. The beauty that radiated out of her, and her voice and her singing, but it was more than that. It was, she was so comfortable with herself, and she had this like peace and serenity, and something within me almost jumped outside of myself. And of course, I'd always been really successful at everything that I'd done in the past, and and I suppose, and I'd always been really enthusiastic. I'd always been a generally happy person, and these past few years, I realised I'd got to the state of misery, and so it was almost like stepping outside of myself for a split second, and sort of thinking, oh my goodness, what on earth has happened here? This is just not you. You're lost. Come on, we've got to do something about this. And so it was. I call it a moment of clarity, or in other situations, I might call it an awakening, a spiritual awakening. At the time, I wouldn't have said that because I didn't have the framework within which to identify it as that. But all I know is that something profound happened to me at that point, and it may have been accumulation of things. And what happened was, it was a moment on which I took action. And so that day, I made a number of phone calls to various organisations, and that was the start of my help. But it wasn't through a statutory organisation; it was through not an organisation, through a fellowship that is run by people who have experienced alcoholism and who are recovering alcoholics. And that was the start of that. And then the next stage of the journey was, of course, everyone in the health services again, but equally, within a few weeks of being separated from the alcohol, various degrees of clarity started to wash over me, and I kind of knew that the medication was dulling my senses, and and I kind of knew within me I had this innate thing within me which said, actually, that I felt like I was going to be all right, and I knew that I would have to come off the medication in order to experience all the things I wanted to experience. So I didn't get sober to live in a perpetual state of apathy and a perpetual state of lethargy and kind of fighting with my own brain fog, because I'm fighting through layers of pharmaceuticals in order to even think. I mean, and I was doing things like, I started doing my psychology degree during that time. I started training in the NHS to be a peer worker. I ended up getting a really good job, and but at the same time, I felt like I wasn't feeling my emotions at all. I was kind of going through the motions of doing all the stuff that I wanted to do, and I had ambitions, but I couldn't feel. And so I decided that I wanted to come off all the medication, which didn't please anybody at all. Anybody in my life. So I kind of had to start off slightly surreptitiously. When I was a year sober, I was discharged from mental health services, And I said to my psychiatrist, who actually I got on very well with, I said, well, I can't leave yet because you need to help me come off all my medication. He went, oh, no, Emma. Take this prescription to a GP and they'll keep giving you these for the rest of your life and then you'll be okay. You know, and so I sort of went, oh, all right then. And I thought, there's no way I'm doing that. I walked straight out of there and thought, right, I need to do something. And so I decided that I would start reducing my medication by myself for 3 months and see what happened. And I wouldn't tell anyone. And then I would go to my GP, who enough at the time to have a choice. And I'd always been him because he gave me some very balanced advice about he knew me quite well because I wanted to be able to prove that I was still sane. You know, after having reduced a certain amount. And so, right, okay, there was a bit of toing and froing, and he said, well, I'm gonna have to write to your psychologist to see what he thinks. And you know, in a nutshell, he basically said, of course I was. And you know, then literally my GP
Can you hear us, Emma? Because we seem to have.
Yeah, he supported me for the next 18 months. Have you lost me?
We did for a period. I think you're back now, but but you were saying about your no one was supporting you, and you were kind of gradually coming off them yourself, and
yeah,
that's kind of where we got to. But I mean, yeah, how long did it take you from start to finish to come off the drugs?
Yeah, so there. So yeah, he's my GP. Did you hear a bit about my GP supporting me? Yeah. So he was very good, and he actually was led by me, which was really helpful. Being honest with him about how I felt. So sometimes, you know, if we were preparing to go down another stage, if I knew that I wasn't feeling that great, you know, with it, then I would stay on it for a bit longer. So it took 18 months from start to finish. And of course, you know, one of the things, I think the myth was that, you know, if you stop taking your medication, you will get ill again. And I have a problem with this word ill. You know, when we're talking about emotions and states of mind, the pathology around, you know, pathologizing emotions and moods and stuff, I find it problematic. So because, you know, instantly if we have a bad day, then we're kind of in danger of going down a route, you know, about, oh gosh, you know, I've had 4 bad days this week. You know, well, when you go back through someone's life and think, well, what's happened this week? You know, where they might have had a row with somebody, or they might have had a breakup with somebody, or they might, you know, things in your life are going to affect you emotionally. And if we have to take a pill for that every single time, you know, we just don't learn how to sit with pain. And actually the gift that I've discovered is being able to sit with pain, feel the intensity of all the emotions that happen around that, and work through it and come out the other side knowing that you have then you start to break some of your kind of patterning and some of your, you know, it's called growth. You know, we come out the other side as better people, more able to deal with these little patterning things that come up, and whether it's with relationships, whether it's with our work or our relationship with ourselves or whatever it is, you know, unless we learn to grow through pain and other, you know, and our emotions, then, you know, we get stuck. So yeah, it was 18 months, and you know, I will be honest with you, that, you know, the effects of the types of drugs that I was taking, and the withdrawal from that, way outstripped the withdrawals that I had from coming off alcohol, and that was pretty bad. You know, that went on for quite a long time because I was, you know, fairly pickled by the time I came off alcohol. You know, so that was bad. But the ongoing effects on our body from psychiatric medication is quite far-reaching, and goes on for many years. And so, you know, I had to learn how to do things that the pills were doing for me, like going to sleep, and you know, experiencing also, you know, I took my last dose. I saw my GP. I took the last dose of one of the antipsychotic medications on the 21st of December 2012, and I wasn't really prepared for the physical reaction, actually, for having the substance coming out of my body. I had flu for like 2 months. You know, I couldn't sleep, anxiety, sweating. I mean, a lot of similar, you know, symptoms that you get with withdrawal from any toxic substance, really. And you know, and I was working at the time, so I had to manage it. And actually, it was a good job that I was working at the time, because it gave me a structure and a framework, you know, with which to manage my life. I had to be present for other people, and it took me out of myself. So otherwise, I might have got caught up in that discourse again of, oh, you're ill, you know. But I was absolutely adamant that I knew if I was able to get through this period of time, that I would recover, and that I would get to a point at which I didn't feel anxious, and I could sleep on my own, and I could, you know, all that sort of thing. And I did, you know, I did. And
it seems to me, looking at this story, and I mean, it's fascinating, because it basically explains a whole load of things that are going on right now. Like, you get lots and lots of support, and it very easily put onto these drugs. 7 minutes, you said, in a consultation, and yet 18 months of pretty much going it alone, saying, actually, I want to come off these. No help and no encouragement to come off these things. So, you know, and pretty much living in a pretty vegetative state while you're on these drugs. It's almost like that's what the medical industry is seeking to do, because what is it? Because people expect a solution of that type, or is it because it's sinister and it's about money?
well, it was interesting, actually, because I remember one lady who came to the bipolar group, and she said to me, I want to bring you my prescription to show you, Emma. And I said, oh, all right then. And she came in, and she had 13 different types of psychiatric medication, plus the medications that they use as a kind of antidote to the side effects. And so I said, oh, so are you happy with this then? So she went, well, not really. You know, I mean, she was incredibly, I will say, when within 6 months of coming off all the medication, without changing my diet or anything else, I'd lost 4 stone like that. You know, within, it's just gone. And you know, she said to me, well, I said, well, how do you feel? You know, I can't tell you what you should or shouldn't be taking. It's not my responsibility. Well, what do you feel about it? And she said, well, to be honest, she said that all they've said to me is that you know, I went back because I had this side effect and I had this pain in my leg and I had this, and I've, you know, she was something like 7 stone overweight. She couldn't move. She said, I'm a bit fed up. She went back because she felt depressed. And instead of, you know, she was trying to explain to them, well, you know, I can't leave the house because I'm so worn out all the time. I want to sleep all the time, and I'm stuck at home. I can't leave the house, and when I do go out, I can't walk anywhere because I've put on so much weight because of this medication, you know. And they said, oh no, it's because you need a different type, another antidepressant. That's what you need. You're depressed. And she sort of said to them, you know, well, why am I taking all this stuff? And they said, well, you know, they said to her, well, you haven't been, it's a record. The psychiatrist said to her, the thing is, you know, you haven't been in hospital for 2 years, and that's really good. So, you know, the pills are keeping you out of hospital. And she didn't buy it. You know, people aren't buying this stuff anymore. Essentially, the alternative is because you're not running around kind of, you know, emoting all over the place and sort of telling people I don't feel great, you know, what they're saying is, oh, it's good because you're not costing us lots of money by going into a psychiatric unit. So what we'd rather do is just, like, you know, zombie you down a bit so you can not move off your sofa, and then we know where you are, we know what you're doing, you know, rather than costing us £750 a day in a psychiatric unit, you know. So yeah, I mean, you know, I try and be, you know, I think there's a whole system that's built up. Obviously, you know, I have spiritual beliefs, quite strong spiritual faith, and you know, and that is part of what has kind of kept me going, really, because my view on a lot of this stuff is that we have a void within us. We have a spiritual void, and we fill it with whatever we can get our hands on to fill that void. And you know, and in terms of, you know, I've been thinking quite a lot lately about the idea of addiction and the extent to which, you know, anything that we put inside ourselves from out there to you know, change the way we feel, without, yeah, which is distracting us from how we feel, which is helping us to avoid having to sit with something that might be a little bit uncomfortable for a few days or weeks or months, whatever, you know, is same principle as, you know, the obvious kind of addictive substances that we come to associate with alcohol and recreational drugs and all that sort of thing. It's no different whether it's gambling or whether it's, you know, self-harm, and that was part of my experience, becomes quite addictive. It's you know, it's another way of distracting us from feeling the full sensation of our experience. And yeah,
so you know, like, if it strikes me that if the medical profession is incredibly good at dishing out these drugs and keeping you in a state of taking these drugs, and that must be costing me. I was talking to a guy on the plane coming from Budapest, who's an ex-psychiatric nurse, I think, and he said the pharmaceutical companies are costing the NHS billions, and you can understand why, if everyone's just being dished out stuff to keep them in a sedative state so they don't cause any trouble, basically. But we're going to need something. I know you talked about this, like a book or something, which basically people can get hold of, because I'm sure you'd have got hold of one if you could have found one, which basically says if you want to come off this stuff and you want to actually have your life back, there's a process that you can go through.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, there's a couple of things there, because, you know, going back to the health costs, I spent 2 or 3 years under cardiology because the medication caused me to have a heart condition. And, you know, during the time I was coming off the medication, I had a very good cardiologist, actually, and I discussed this with him, and I said, you know, I'm coming off this medication. They wanted to do heart surgery. You know, heart surgery that comes with a risk of death, you know, during the surgery. You know, I read the stats. They wanted to do radio frequency ablation, and you know, I think for the investigation, there was a 1 in 10,000 risk of death, which actually isn't, the odds aren't that low, you know, to be honest with you. And then the other, and then if they went on to do the procedure, it was a 1 in 1,000 chance of death. And so I said to him, I said, look, I've got this hunch that it's my medication that's causing this condition, and therefore I would like you to wait until I've been off them for a little while, until we go ahead and do this procedure, which I'm not happy about, because actually now I'd like to live, please, you know. And so he said, yeah, fine. And of course, lo and behold, after sort of 6 to 8, 9 months of being off the medication, the heart condition had cleared up completely. And he actually wrote in my discharge letter, you know, where's the effect that it was the medication that caused this condition, because, you know, it's gone, and he's never known anyone to cure themselves of this particular thing, you know. So of course I had a discussion with him. He gave me the names of a couple of people who had trained in cardiology after psychiatry and vice versa, and because I was quite interested in perhaps pursuing that line of, you know, the cost, you know, because that's what they're interested in, reducing the cost of things. But, you know, so, and then the next part, of course, of your question was about, you know, how we come off these things. And you're right. When I was coming off, there was no instruction manual. There was nothing. There had been a group in Cambridge that was dedicated to people who wanted to come off, and it was a support group. But that had been pulled, and it wasn't part of the NHS. And so there was nothing at the time. I managed to find a book that came from Germany, I think, that had like a collection of stories of people's experiences of being on medication, and then, you know, that they come off them. But there was no kind of how-to guide. And so that's what I'm going to write about, actually, because, and at first, I mean, I was a little bit, had a little bit of fear around it. So at first I thought I'd write about something else. I'm kind of scared about the issue because it's a kind of raising your head above the parapet thing. And you know, and then I had some very strong messages coming to me, actually, about the fact that it needs to be, you know, I came off medication. This is how to come off medication. And more about the inspirational side of it as well, the fact that it is possible, because there are people that have done this, obviously, and quite often, you know, people might be on you know, various things. I worked with somebody, actually, within mental health services who'd been a mental health social worker for many, many years, who had been put on antidepressants herself years and years before for a short period of time, and 11 years later, she still could not come off them. And she knew that she would have to take 3 months off work just to recover from the withdrawal from them. And so she had to keep taking them, you know, because of her role. You know, there's lots of stories like that. And I actually, you know, feel, you know, that there are, I don't think I have the definitive answer as to, you know, I don't want to be dogmatic about things, because I think that's the trouble, that's the whole point, the trouble with the situation that we're in and the society, is that it's dogmatic, and so, you know, I have a kind of idea of how it might go. And actually, interestingly, a lady's recently been back in touch with me who I worked with in one of my previous roles, to tell me that she used my suggestions, and now she's medication free herself from the same kind of combination of medication. So, and I think it's also it's a combination of the types of labels that people are given as well. And I think that in itself, when you have a label of bipolar disorder or a label of schizophrenia or something like that, on your medical records forevermore, it's a big sign that says SMI, and it stands for severe mental illness. And so wherever you go and a doctor pulls up your medical records, it says SMI first and foremost. So even if you're going there to talk about your big toe, instantly they will make a judgment about you based on the fact that you have what is termed serious mental illness, and that's unacceptable. And so, you know, it's tied up with all of that, and also the kind of discourse that we have around if people have one of these so-called severe mental illnesses, that you will have it forever. It'll always be with you. You will always be considered ill, and there's no recovery, although there's no cure. You know, there's no. We're looking for this cure. We're endlessly looking for genes for this and genes for that. And I'm sorry, but you're never going to find them. You know, because this stuff is within us, and you know, we're made up of all these different components and characteristics and beautiful things that we all have, and our little quirks. And I might hear this voice, and she might see that thing, and he might think whatever, you know, and have these radical ideas. And it's the beauty of being an individual, you know, human being in this kind of collective consciousness that we have. It's lovely, you know. Let's celebrate everyone's differences and uniqueness instead of, you know.
It is really sad, isn't it, that everybody's looking to be put into a bucket. I'm bipolar, I'm this, I'm that, I've got serious mental illness, something else. And actually what they're describing are people who are really suffering from a set of symptoms which culminate in a certain type of behaviour, which for this person, based on their belief systems and their history and their conditioning, is manifesting itself in a certain way. And it's different for every person. But yeah, okay, the drugs are pretty uniform, but it's the constant trying to find a solution and a label which justifies. You know, you hear labels of kids being like hyperactive and ADH, whatever, ADHI, whatever, and actually all they are like really energetic kids, you know, like who want to go out and do stuff. Like, get them out playing sport. Don't try and squash put some drugs in them. I mean, what's that all about?
Or the other one of attention deficit, you know, where they're kind of looking out the window, daydreaming all the time. These kids are daydreaming of our future. Do you know what I mean? Let them daydream. Let them look out the window and look at the trees. You have no idea what's going on in that little mind that could revolutionize something, you know. It astounds me. And of course, putting drugs into children is, you know, you're setting off then, you're changing the chemistry in the brain, and you're changing the neural pathways, and we can't learn how to develop. And really, you know, with anything, the way, you know, that the brain is, plasticity of the brain is such that, you know, a lot of our behavior, a lot of the way we think, you know, our thoughts kind of lead to our feelings and everything else. And if we've had a lifelong patterning of, you know, going down a certain route of thinking and feeling, and we get ourselves into these emotional states, you know, that's all it is. You can change that. You know, you can change that. You can think a new thought. And if you think a new thought consistently enough over a period of time, that pathway gets weaker and the new one gets stronger. And then our default mechanism, you know, becomes something else. I mean, my default, I don't drink alcohol. I don't need to drink alcohol. My pathway was so strong, I had no recourse to anything else apart from alcohol for a while, you know, to deal with anything. You know, if it was a good mood, a bad mood, you know, something, you know, a rainy day, a sunny day, or, you know, I drank on it, you know. Now I have had some terrible things happen in recovery and sobriety. I never think of a drink. I have a different default pattern. I live in a solution-based, you know, framework where nothing is ever impossible. We always have a choice. I take responsibility. Even if I've made a crappy decision, that's my problem, and I have to take responsibility, and I can change it. I can't change what you do or what you think or what you say, but I can change the way that I respond to things, and I can change the way I think about things, which ultimately changes the way I feel about things. And, you know, if we all do that, you know, and I think that, you know, the whole question with the labelling and everything else is, you know, I've come across people, and I come across people regularly who, you know, who kind of want a label, you know, they want to know, and I can understand how you might want some kind of some validation about how you're feeling. Maybe you might want, some information or whatever, maybe. But ultimately, actually, it's not fun. There's been a massive fad for things like bipolar disorder. It's quite trendy, and of course, it's not a glamorous thing to be labelled with. And once you have it there, stamped in your record forever, there are all sorts of repercussions to that, which is another thing that I will be dealing with at some point. So they've put me in remission now, so it doesn't come up anymore on my record from now, but it's what happens to the previous, numbers of years of it. But yeah, it's all about completely. It's a total refocus that needs to happen.
What you said was people taking responsibility for their thinking, and I think this is a massive challenge. Is that people are looking for a solution in a bottle, they're looking to be compartmentalised. Oh, I've got that, therefore I need this, and they're looking for a quick fix. And actually, what you were talking about with the alcohol there is quite interesting, because what you basically have done is said, to go back to that really dark place where I was with alcohol is infinitely worse than me handling the short-term pain of this problem that's just come up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if people reframe things in that way and basically see the alternative as, because I'm a bit black and white, either I'm drinking or I'm not drinking. I can switch off. I'm not drinking. I haven't drunk for a couple of weeks. So what? It's like it's neither here nor there for me, because actually I fill my life with other things that basically replace that alcohol. I was never drinking it because I was drinking it because I like the taste. It's a different thing. I'm not doing it to get blotto or hide what's going on. I'm doing it because I just enjoy it.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I mean, there's an awful lot of work to be done, because I think you can, I certainly translate the things that I've learned from my recovery in alcoholism to every aspect of my life. We have lots of little sort of sayings in AA, and just the tools that are out there. If you're fortunate enough to sort of find a holistic, nurturing place, and fellowship, and where you can explore sort of other ways of kind of looking at yourself, and really you have to take yourself to pieces, and that's the thing. You have to kind of get back to the nub of who you are, and then be kind of standing that power that you have, rather than I'm not saying, I think sometimes in the roles I've done, and there's this bit about sometimes when we tell our story, I think it's about getting a balance. You don't want to sit there and kind of say it was this and it was that, because that's done now. Okay, people want to know that stuff. People who are all in a dark place now want to know, from a kind of peer support perspective, that the person that they are talking to actually really does know where they've been and how it feels. And of course, in the beauty of our human experience in this lifetime is that I can't know exactly how you feel. I can't step into your experience as such. However, there are certain elements maybe of in a peer support environment where I can kind of understand the depth of pain, and that sort of thing. I won't feel it in the same way. I won't experience it in the same way. But that's the thing about doing, supporting people to come out of that from the position that you're in now. So I think one of the things is that sometimes, when I stood up in front of classes of people, and they looked to me like you said at the beginning, looking really well, and they you kind of need to go back there for a bit to say, I get you, I hear you, and I understand some of how you felt. And then, but the big thing is bringing it to the solution and doing that journey from, okay, I'm here now, this is where I was, and this is the route that I took. And of course, again, everyone will have slightly different routes. You know, for me, it was about sort of engaging with a power greater than myself. You know, call it spirituality, maybe. You know, but it was also about connecting. It was about connecting with the core person of who I am, and getting to know that person and love that person and build up the worthiness and the self-esteem, all those words that we use, you know, that often, you know, other things when that's not there, when that foundation isn't there, then that's when we turn to other things to sort of to do. So it's been a bit of a building up process, and using the positivity, and you know sometimes there are different stages of it. You know, in the early days, I had a really almost like a Pollyanna kind of outlook on everything, and now, you know, I'm in a strong enough place to actually sort of revisit some of the painful stuff and you know, work through it at an even deeper level. Sometimes you have to get to that level of you know, okay, I believe that there is a positive outcome for me, you know, and that's the initial thing. Getting to that stage of whatever happens, I am going to be okay, you know, and you have to believe that, and then you can start to kind of chip away at some of the other stuff. But you know what? It's a lifelong process. And actually, if we stop growing, you know, if we stop doing this work, then we stop growing, and then we miss all sorts of wonderful opportunities. And I love it.
Well, it's been a fascinating interview. We were supposed to do 12 to 15 minutes, but we kind of got really into a longer conversation. What I might do, with your permission, is actually put this into a different TV slot, into perhaps the health and wellness area, because I think it's got all sorts of, and maybe in the inspirational area as well, because actually people who are perhaps in a place that you're well acquainted with will find this really quite an important thing to watch. And you know, I think if anybody's struggling out there, there's quite a lot of good ideas in what you've been talking about. So.
Are we finished now then?
You know, it's you know, we can put it in the What's Your Story because it's quite long, but I think actually rather than try and chop it up and stuff, I could have the whole thing. So with your permission, I'll do that.
Yeah, all right then. Okay.
All right, so thanks ever so much for spending the time. Obviously, we've taken longer than we expected, but I think it's been fascinating. Certainly, for me, it opens up a whole can of worms in terms of where the medical industry is at the moment, and the doctors and the pharmaceutical companies and everything else. But roll on writing that book, because hopefully one of those people encouraging you has been me, and you need to get it done, to be fair.
Yeah. No, it's great. I mean, there's a massive conversation to be had. We've only, you know, touched the surface, and lots of different aspects of it. So I'll be looking forward to having those conversations in the future.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks for joining me, Emma, and I will see you soon.
Yeah, see you soon.
Take care. Bye now. Bye.
Bye.